The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos.
Yep, the vision. That's what I'm after. Now, when you take a trip, you kind of need a map, don't you? You need to know where you're going. In other words, you need a vision of the road, right? So, this is why I stress that in order for us to engage this interior work that the church is leading us into, we have to work, probably what we have to work the most hard to do is to purify our mind, which means to let go of all images, all presuppositions, all understandings, all thoughts. That's what it means to pure prayer. That's what pure prayer is. It means emptying the mind of all its own ideas, all of its own wisdom, which I just want to anticipate. I want to jump ahead. This is what we read last week from Isaiah. We were in chapter 5. Where is it? Hang on. Okay. Chapter 5. Woe to them that call evil good and good evil, who make darkness light and light darkness, who make bitter sweet and sweet bitter. How is it that one goes about doing that? How is it that one goes about mistaking the darkness for light, or mistaking evil for good, or calling it evil? But how does one go about doing that? And you see it happening in our culture. We're making evil to be good. We're making the good to be evil in our culture. How is it that we go about doing that? I think Isaiah gives the answer. Woe to them that are wise in their own conceit, and knowing in their own sight. This is why in the church we stress. We stress. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't know my daughter Katie has gotten over this yet even. Remember, Katie? I think you were junior in high school?
Yeah.
Yep, see, she even knows what I'm talking about. I said to her, you're too young to have an opinion of your own. I think it's traumatized her. But you understand what's behind that. I mean, what's the world? The world is teaching us to be wise in our own conceit and knowing in our own sight. And so when you come into the church, that's not going to get you to God. It's not going to get you into your heart. It's going to get you into something else that will be diluting. And so, the first Monday of Great Lent, after the church has led us through the imagery of the myrrh-bearing women returning and entering into their closet to pray, the first thing she gives us is this passage from Isaiah. It's the first thing that we read. The vision of Isaiah. In a minute, we'll go on to read more about this vision that Isaiah is seeing. But for now, I want to go back to Luke chapter 23. And go again to this passage that we read on the Thursday before coming into Great Lent. It says, the women who had followed him and had been with him from Galilee, it says, they saw the tomb and how his body was laid. And that strikes me. So the last time that we read from the gospel before entering Great Lent, what was ringing in our ears is this: the women saw the tomb and how his body was laid. And then the first thing that we read when we come into Great Lent, the very first Monday of Great Lent, what we read is this from Isaiah. The vision. What Isaiah saw. What did they see? Well, what did the women see? That's easy. They saw the Lord. They saw the tomb. The dead Jesus. They saw the dead God. What did Isaiah see? Well, you have to read further in Isaiah. And here's where you have to start reading, I think, with a very fine ear. The vision Isaiah the son of Amos saw, which he saw against Judah and against Jerusalem in the reign of Ozias and Jotham and Ahaz and Ezekias, who reigned over Judea. Hear, O heaven, and hearken, O earth. The Lord has spoken, saying, I have begotten and reared up children, but they have rebelled against me. Now hang on. Please keep in mind the context, the liturgical, the mystical, the theological context in which we are reading Isaiah. What is it? What is that context?
Lent.
Yes. Elaborate though. I mean, it's Lent. What is it? What's happening? What did we just leave? What's the vision that we came into Lent with? Was it not? Yes, Christ in the tomb. Christ in the tomb. So understand, that's what I want you to see. That you read it. When you read this, when you read the assigned readings for the week as given to us in the church during this period, you need to be reading it in the context of what the women saw, which was the tomb, and how the Lord was laid, how his body was laid in the tomb. So if that's your context, well, I mean, obviously it implies, that context implies the vision of Christ on the cross. Remember even the centurion. Remember even, it wasn't on Thursday itself, it may have been the day or two before Thursday that we read of the Lord's death on the cross, and we read about the centurion. We read from Luke, we did not read from Matthew. And it's in Matthew where it says, it goes into a little bit more detail about the centurion. But remember about the centurion, what does it say? When he saw these things, he said, surely this was the Son of God. So my point is that when we're coming into Lent and we're being given these passages to read from within this vision of Christ on the cross and buried in the tomb. Remember what we read the third Sunday, just before the Sunday when we began Lent? It was the Sunday of the Judgment. Okay? The Lord is judging the nations, remember? On that Sunday. And you read that particular gospel in its context also of the week before and the week after. And in that context, you see that the judgment seat of Christ is his, fill in the blanks for 250 points, cross. His judgment seat is his cross. Now, in that vision of Christ judging the world, judging the nations from his cross, and from the vision of God dead in the tomb, we read this. Now, in that day, just see how it strikes you. Hear, O heaven, and hearken, O earth, for the Lord has spoken, saying, I have begotten and reared up children, but they have rebelled against me. The ox knows his owner, and the ass his master's crib, but Israel does not know me, and this people has not regarded me. This people, Israel, does not know me. What does St. Paul say about the Christ on the cross? If they had known, would they have crucified the Lord of glory? I mean, I'm not asking the question, that's the question St. Paul asked. Israel has not known. That's why they crucified him. They did not know him. And he was their God. He was their king, right? He was the one who brought them into being, and they did not know him. An ox knows his owner, the ass his master's crib, but Israel does not know me, its Lord. Ah, sinful nation. A people full of sins, an evil seed, lawless children. You have forsaken the Lord, and you have provoked the Holy One of Israel. Why would you be smitten any more? Transgressing more and more. The whole head is pained, the whole heart sad. From the feet to the head, there is no soundness in them. Neither wound, nor bruise, nor festering ulcer are healed. It is not possible to apply a plaster, nor oil, nor bandages. You're beyond repair. Your land is desolate, your soul. Your city is burned with fire. Your land, strangers devour it in your presence. Who are these strangers devouring the cities of your soul? The passions. Anger, lust, greed, and all those things. They're devouring your soul. They're laying it waste. Overthrown by strange nations. Who are these strange nations? They're the nations of the devils. The darkness. That's what you've given yourself to. And look at you. Look inside of you. Look inside of you. Are you the way you want to be? I mean, where's the light? That's what it's saying. But now listen. What's really striking is that the words that Isaiah is using here in chapter 1 to describe the sores and the wounds that are afflicting Israel are the same words that he uses in Isaiah chapter 53. The very same words. Can you guess what those words are? Who has believed our report, and whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? We brought the report as of a child before him, as a root in a thirsty land. He has no form nor comeliness. We saw him, but he had no form nor beauty. I don't know that we're using the same words here, but you see the same imagery. Israel has no form, no beauty, no comeliness, because she's from head to her foot. She is stricken with wounds and sores. I mean, what sick person do you know is beautiful? You know? What corpse is beautiful? And we saw him, but he had no form or beauty. His form was ignoble and inferior to that of the children of men. He was a man in suffering and acquainted with the bearing of sickness, for his face is turned from us. He was dishonored and not esteemed. He bears our sins, and he is pained for us. We accounted him to be in trouble and in suffering and in affliction, but he was wounded on account of our sins, and was bruised because of our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his wounds are we healed. I mean, don't you get kind of a different vision of Isaiah, and also of what's going on in Lent? I mean, listen. If we follow the church, listen real closely, okay? She's bringing us into this interior work of our interior being. But she doesn't just leave us there and say, go for it, you know. She shows us what to think on. She gives us the vision to meditate, to ponder on. And the vision is this. I go into Lent in the vision of Christ suffering and dying on the cross and being buried in the tomb, just like I'm going to be. And in that vision, she gives to us this vision of Isaiah, in which she points me inward. And I see, if I'm following the church, I begin to see my own darkness, right? And how I am a slave, a worshiper, a devotee of greed, lust, gluttony, vanity, conceit, pride. I'm the one who should be punished, right? I'm the one who should be punished. And so in this vision of and if you have trouble seeing that in yourself, come to the canon of St. Andrew on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday night. And St. Andrew will help you to see what's inside your soul. So in that vision of seeing my own shame, my own putrid, stench unto death, the stench of my soul unto death, I'm also seeing Christ on the cross, taking it all on himself. And then in that vision, we read from Genesis. I'll do this real quick. We start reading from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1.
Those two images, he's identifying with Israel. Right? He took those two images.
Yes, he is.
Himself.
But what the church is doing in sending us to that, into that passage, is she's telling us, you are Israel. And Israel is no better than anybody else. Because if Israel goes beneath her Israeliteness, what does she find? She finds she's just like everybody else. She's as much a lover of the idols as the pagans are. She has the covering of the Jewish law, but beneath that covering, she's going after all the idols. Anger, lust, greed, all of those good things. That's what she's worshiping. That's what she's living for. So I am Israel. You are Israel. We are all Israel. So in that vision of Christ dying on the cross and taking upon himself the condemnation that is mine, because it says in Deuteronomy that anyone who hangs on the cross, the curse of God is upon him. So the curse that is upon me, that should be upon me, he is putting upon himself. And then in that vision, we go to Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. But the earth was unsightly and unfurnished. It's kind of a bad translation, but that's what it says. The earth was, it had no form. And there was nothing in it. And darkness was over the deep, and the Spirit of God moved over the water. Now what comes to your mind when you read that? And what's going on in this mystery of great light? What's ultimately in the innermost, the deepest depths, what's going on? With Christ dying on the cross, being buried in the tomb on his Sabbath, and of me coming into myself and seeing how dark and small and starved and shriveled up and hard-hearted I am. What's going on?
From darkness to light, nothingness to...
A creation, exactly. A creation. In this there's a creation happening. What's the beginning? It says, in the beginning. What's that?
The Spirit moved.
I would suggest that the end of the beginning is the tomb. In the beginning, in the tomb, in the Sabbath rest of God. He is recreating. Because listen, I pointed this out before, so repeat it. You read Genesis chapter 1, and it concludes with the Sabbath rest of God. It says God rested from all his works. And in the Greek it says, from all the works that he began to do, as though he was not finished. So then it comes to the Sabbath, and he's resting. But then immediately he goes on, he starts creating again. I'm thinking that this Sabbath in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 and 3, 1 through 3, is a prophecy, if you will. Like both. It corresponds. It has a correspondence to the very beginning here, the nothingness of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And both of them are pointing towards the death of God on the cross and his rest in the tomb. That's the Sabbath rest. And in that Sabbath, he is, as in this Sabbath in Genesis, he fashions Adam from the dirt, from the dust. In the tomb, in the Sabbath rest of his tomb, he refashions Adam in the dust, if you will, of his own flesh, his own body. And so there's a new creation taking place. And then we go from Genesis to Proverbs, where it's all about holding fast to the word, to the wisdom of the word of your father and mother, which would be the Lord and the church. This is the word. If you hold it in your heart, if you embed it in your heart, this is the word that will save you. This is the word that will bring you to life. This is the word that will guide you into the mystery of God's creation and his creating in us a clean heart, putting in us a one right spirit. So that's what I wanted to share with you this morning. It's time to go.